Hello, I am Curiosity, and welcome to my Introduction to Trapper. I will start by explaining each individual Trapper, giving a basic premise of their abilities, and then going into depth on how to play them within a match. To start, I will explain the Planet Scanner, which every Trapper has. This is the ability that on the icon in the bottom gives you a nice friendly red arrow pointing exactly where death is. In addition, it gives the Trapper a short boost of move speed, so it's very helpful for getting that dome and continuing the chase if you know where the monster is already. Because the monster is aware of when the planet scan is used, you have to be careful. A smart monster will wait for the scan, sitting in a corner, and the moment it comes up will move out of the position, leaving you thinking they're in one place when they're actually well across the map evolving. The first Trapper, and probably my favorite, would be Maggie. She has 4 abilities, as do all Trappers: the Machine Pistol, the Harpoon Traps, the Pet Drop Jaw, and of course the Planet Scanner. The Machine Pistol has very high spread, so burst firing at long range is suggested. The Harpoon Traps take a few seconds to arm. You deploy up to 3 at a time, and once they are armed, the monster has to walk in range and they will activate, trapping the monster in place. Much like Griffin's Harpoons, he has to turn and break them with a single auto attack. Of course, if he faces the wrong direction or is in mid-traversal when they trigger, it will stop him in his place. When fighting with Maggie, I heavily suggest avoiding stacking your Harpoon Traps. If they're all from the same angle and the monster is pinned by them, it takes a single swing in order to remove them. Instead, what I like to do is set them up on varying elevations as well as various angles. Around corners, so that when the monster travels past, they will be harpooned by surprise, instead of right in front. A good example would be right on top of a cliff, where it won't trigger unless he is significantly away from it, but when he's approaching, it will keep it mostly safe so that he can't get an easy clear. As well, when a hunter climbs up to the top, it will allow the monster or the hunter to retreat, and when the monster gets on top, the harpoon will trigger, slowing down his chase. Maggie is extremely strong against a sneaky monster or during a dome fight. Because she can have 3 traps set up at any time, she can have multiple angles prepared, as well as fighting a sneaky monster. The daisy tracking can prevent any double backs. The next Trapper is Wasteland Maggie. Very similar to the default Maggie, there's a few changes. For starter, her pistol only fires in 2-round bursts, and so you have to rapidly click in order to fire multiple times. It also will do burn damage. Maggie can set down a single flame snare, which is equivalent to the Harpoon Traps, but instead of 3, there is only 1, and it also burns the monster when it triggers. It will also arm slightly faster. I believe it's 2 seconds faster, the 5 versus 3. Daisy, instead of being a standard trapjaw, now has a flamethrower attached to her, and of course there is the Planet Scanner. Wasteland Maggie does significantly more damage than standard Maggie, but she doesn't have as much defensive utility. Gameplay would be very similar, although your single trap has to be set in a slightly different position in order to cover the most likely path that your friends will be traveling through. Following Wasteland Maggie is Griffin. He has an SMG which is slightly more accurate than Maggie's, and so you don't need to burst fire it, although it does have lower rate of fire. He has a harpoon gun, which fires a longer range harpoon directed from Griffin. It is very useful for chasing monsters, but it does not affect the monster if you are in the air. You have to be grounded in order for it to work. There are also the sound spikes, which cover a very large area. I believe it's 70 meters. And anytime the monster moves through this area, he will be affected by the sound spikes, and everyone will receive an icon on their screen showing where he is, updating every few seconds. However, the sound spikes do not trigger if the monster is sneaking, unless he is, I believe it's within 10 meters of the actual spikes. They will also identify the monster's roar when he is evolving, even if the monster is not within the sound spike radius. When fighting with Griffin, it is very important to have the monster between you and the target of the monster's fury. If the monster is focusing down your medic, the medic needs to be running away from you so that you can actually stop the monster from chasing. Because of this, the harpoon only works if the monster is running away from you, and so if he's moving towards you, it'll just retract on its own and do nothing. When playing Griffin in a team composition before you receive the dome or right after the dome fades. It's very important to be able to not need to climb over cliffs in order to keep the harpoon active. You can still walk at the monster while the harpoon is active and have the slow effect active. Using speed boost with the trapper, including using the planet scan, which gives that sprint, can help you keep in range in order to get that harpoon, which allows your team to get that extra health damage before the monster goes and finishes eating. When using the sound spikes, it's important to cover large areas that the monster will likely travel through. This includes major choke points that happen to have important crossing paths to cover multiple areas of the map, as well as areas that may include the monster going for food. So areas where there are significant amounts of striders or thunderbirds, they will all be very good to have spikes nearby in order to catch the monster if he ever manages to dodge you. Following Griffin is Abe. He has a shotgun, which increases accuracy the lower rate of fire you follow. The faster you shoot, the more spread there will be. He also has the stasis grenades, which last for around 15 seconds, floating and giving a slow effect. It will also pull the Kraken and the Wraith out of the sky. It increases the effects of gravity on them, which is very useful to prevent a Kraken from staying at long range. His tracking ability is the tracking dart pistol. This can go into wildlife as well as the monster, and if the monster eats wildlife, then they will be tracked. It's a very useful tool, and I suggest as you are hunting to shoot all wildlife available. When playing as Abe, the most important thing is to get a dart into the monster. Using the planet scan as well as your tracking dart will allow you to get a rough estimate of where the monster is, and landing that dart ensures you can continue the chase. Lobbing stasis grenades into the choke points where the monster may run can help you keep on him and keep re-darting him until eventually someone cuts off and manages to land the dome. When fighting in the dome, it's very important to put stasis grenades on cliffs and anywhere your hunters may run. This will allow them to have that little extra space to keep that pressure off them and get them back up enough to survive the next hit. Constantly switching between weapons in fights allows you to keep the tag up, stasis grenades active, and then also dealing significant damage. After Abe, we have Crow. Crow has the kinetic long rifle, which is basically a sniper rifle. He has the stasis gun and his bat ray, Gobi. The long rifle is good. I generally rapid fire if we have a dome, and I charge shot if they're low. Again, rapid fire is pretty good for breaking the armor and dealing health damage, but the charge shot allows you to bypass armor entirely, which is very useful against squishy monsters or monsters that have very low health but happen to have armor on them. It's also important to use when you think the monster will get away and you won't be able to break through armor in time. So if you have dome fading and the monster is still fighting but hasn't lost armor, you might want to be going for health damage instead, because the armor will regenerate long before you can actually break through it. The stasis gun is a very powerful slow. It's one of my favorite weapons to use against the Kraken, just because you can keep it active and keep the Kraken slowly falling towards the ground. Single shots are very important when you can't land a fully charged one, but landing a fully charged one will last for significantly longer and allows you to deal damage. My general strategy when fighting the Bat Ray Gobi is one of Crow's most useful tools. It creates an outline similar to Cabot's Dust Tag or Val's Tranquilizer Dart, which lets you see the monster through walls. Gobi can go about 200 meters in any straight line, and it will generally avoid obstacles. If you fire it off, he will scan the area and reveal all wildlife and the monster if encountered. This is very useful because it allows you to see any jukes, any hiding, and it lets you get your team enough information to get the proper cutoff and get the dome. Once the chase is completed and you have landed the dome with Crow, I generally suggest having weapon switch available, rapid weapon switch as a perk. This is because I will fully charge a stasis shot, fire it into the monster, switch to my kinetic long rifle, fire off every shot I can, switch to Gobi, get that so that we can see him even if he's in bushes, switch back to the stasis, and repeat until either we win the fight or the dome goes down. This is so I can keep all my debuffs active on the monster as well as getting damage. Again, uptime on the slow is very important in a fight because it gives your team just that little amount of breathing room they need in order to make sure they don't go down. The last and final hunter is Jack. Unfortunately, I have not played him significantly, so I can't give specific strategy, but his dual pistols are good damage. His repulsor is fantastic if you can get the right angle. The beam is very tricky to land properly. Basically, it locks onto the monster, and if you angle it away, it'll change the direction that it is pushing the monster. So if I see the monster at 12 o'clock, but he's moving directly to his left, I can fire off at roughly 9 o'clock, and if I do it correctly, it will stop him from moving to his right or left. The survey satellite is a tool that is very useful for finding tracks, corpses, elite wildlife, as well as the monster. It does minor damage to the monster, sending lasers going outward in a circular pattern, identifying anything it finds. It has one of the longest ranges of any tracking ability, and setting it a large choke point to cover multiple pathways is very useful. Unfortunately, it slowly moves outward, and so it won't instantly discover the monster like other tools will. When fighting with Jack, it's very important to position yourself well. In short, you want to be set up so that when your team is running, they run towards you, in the direct opposite that you would play as Griffin. The repulsor allows you to prevent the monster from chasing. You don't have to be directly set up, you can angle it properly, but that introduces another level of complexity. Jack is my least recommended trapper simply because of the skill required for the repulsor, as well as his weakness with his detection abilities. When you're using the repulsor, it's very important to notice, as it says, if the beam is red, it's not working. It comes out to a yellowish green color if it is succeeding, and that stops a monster dead in its tracks. This has been all the trappers available for Evolve. This has been Curiosity with a brief overview of the trappers. As I leave you, one of the most important things to remember is outside of the dome, the trapper's job is to identify the monster's location and allow his team to cut and capture said monster. Inside the dome, trapper's main job is to make sure the monster has a difficult time focusing a single target. I tend to call him a peeler because he peels the monster off. If you do a great job, the monster is no longer focusing your medic or support and will instead be forced to turn on you. Thank you, and happy hunting.